Long ago, in a lively village surrounded by tall palm trees and wide red dirt paths, there lived a girl whose beauty was spoken of from one compound to another. If you walked through the village at sunrise, you would see clay huts with thatched roofs glowing softly in the morning light. Goats wandered lazily between the houses. Women balanced baskets of tomatoes, peppers, and cassava on their heads as they walked toward the market. The air smelled of roasted corn, dried fish, and spices. Children laughed as they chased each other along the dusty paths. In that village lived a girl named Amora. Amora was the most beautiful girl anyone had ever seen. Her skin shone like polished bronze under the sun. Her eyes sparkled like river water, and when she walked through the village, people turned their heads to watch her pass. Young men whispered to one another. "Oh, look at Amora," one would say. "She is as beautiful as the moon," another replied. Even the old women in the village sometimes sighed and said, "That girl is truly blessed." But my children, listen carefully, beauty can be a gift, but pride can turn a gift into trouble. Because as the praises grew, Amora's heart also grew. Too big with pride, she began to believe she was more important than everyone else. She greeted elders carelessly. She mocked girls she believed were not as beautiful. When people spoke to her, she often turned away as if their words were not worth hearing. The villagers began to whisper among themselves. One day, an old man said, shaking his head, "Life will teach that girl humility." Now listen well, because the day of that lesson came sooner than anyone expected. One bright morning, the village market was busier than usual. Colorful fabrics hung from wooden stalls. Women sold baskets of yams, peppers, and okra. Traders called out loudly, "Fresh fish! Fresh fish from the river! Sweet mangoes! Taste them!" Goats bleated. Chickens flapped their wings. The market was alive with sound. Amora walked through the market proudly, her waist beat jingling softly as she moved. She wore a bright wrapper of red and gold cloth, and many young men watched her with admiration. "Good morning, Amora," called one girl. Amora barely nodded. As she walked between the stalls, an old woman slowly stepped into her path. The old woman looked poor. Her wrapper was faded and patched. Her back was slightly bent, and she carried a small basket of herbs. "Child," the old woman said gently, "please help me pick up the herbs that fell from my basket." Some leaves had scattered on the ground. But Amora frowned. "Move out of my way, old woman," she said sharply. The old woman looked at her calmly. "Respect is the cloth that never tears, my child," she said softly. "Do not throw it away." The people nearby grew quiet. But Amora felt insulted. "How dare you lecture me?" she snapped. Before anyone could stop her, slap. Her hand struck the old woman's cheek. The entire market fell silent. Even the goats stopped bleating. Women covered their mouths in shock. One man whispered, "She has slapped an elder," another said quietly, "This is not good." The old woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, which had seemed tired and weak before, now shone with a strange and powerful light. "My child," she said in a calm voice that carried across the market, "beauty without humility is like a calabash without water, empty." Then she picked up her basket and walked away. Another said quietly, "This is not good." The old woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, which had seemed tired and weak before, now shone with a strange and powerful light. "My child," she said in a calm voice "My child," she said in a calm voice that carried across the market, "beauty without humility is like a calabash without water, empty." Then she picked up her basket and walked away. No one dared to speak. The strange change. That night something unusual began to happen. When Amora looked into the mirror of polished metal in her room, she gasped. Her beautiful face had begun to change. Not into ugliness, but into something strange. Whenever she spoke harshly or proudly, her face twisted slightly, as if her inner pride was showing on the outside. The next day in the market, people stared. "Is something wrong with Amora?" someone whispered. Amora became angry. But the angrier she became, the stranger her face appeared. Soon the young men who once praised her began to avoid her. Children whispered when she passed. For the first time in her life, Amora felt something she had never felt before. Loneliness. Days passed. Amora remembered the words of the old woman. Beauty without humility is empty. Finally, with a heavy heart, she went looking for the old woman. She searched the market, the riverbank, and the forest path. At last she found the woman sitting under a large baobab tree outside the village. Amora fell to her knees. "Mother," she said softly, "I have come to ask for forgiveness." The old woman looked at her kindly. "What have you learned, child?" she asked. Amora lowered her head. "I thought beauty made me greater than others," she said. "But I see now that kindness and respect are more beautiful than any face." The old woman smiled. "Now your heart is beginning to see." She touched Amora's forehead gently. "True beauty lives inside humility." At that moment, the strange change disappeared. Amora's face returned to normal. But something more important had changed. Her heart. From that day forward, Amora greeted elders with deep respect. She helped the poor, spoke kindly to children, and treated everyone with humility. And do you know something, my children? The villagers began to admire her again. But this time, it was not only for her beauty. It was for her character. The elders' moral. And so, children, remember this. Beauty can attract the eyes, but humility wins the heart. Respect your elders, for wisdom often walks in humble clothing. And that is the story of the most beautiful girl in the village who slapped an old woman.